Hi there. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to be here with all of you today. My name is Karen McClanahan, and I'm the CEO and executive consultant at Aesthetic Practice Partners. And I'm honored and proud to also be a mentor to the Be Her Powered by MedShift program and support this amazing community of aesthetic business owners as we work to help elevate and grow aesthetics together. Today, I'm going to be talking about creating dynamic change in your practice. And this means a lot of different things. But when I think about what is dynamic change, that really is a focus on growing your practice by impactful changes that you can make as you look to really revolutionize how your business operates on a day to day basis. Now, what's the difference between change and dynamic change? And I think that that's up to perception, but my opinion is that dynamic change is really dramatic and wide reaching change, changing the way not only our practices work, but creating impact, not just change for the sake of change. We know as business owners, we have to pivot and change strategies for things that we do all the time, but how do we ensure that those changes are creating that impact that we really want to have in our practice? And I want to challenge each of you to create dynamic change by simply thinking differently about how we do the things that we do every single day in our practice. Whenever I give this presentation, which is usually a 2 hour long workshop, and I've truncated it for you guys today. But whenever I give this presentation from podium in the workshop, I always say that I challenge you to think differently. We don't have to make dramatic changes to get dramatic results. We can make little tiny tweaks to how we do things every single day by also simply thinking differently about how we do those things. And let me give you some examples of that here in a moment. But let's start with this and think about how you can be exceptional, not just average in your business. And while this quote comes from outside of our industry and is a bit dated, I think it's actually really relevant to how we talk about impacting our industry and kind of what's going on in our industry today. So it starts by saying in the 1980s, quality was a differentiator. And I think that that was really true for a certain era in medical aesthetics. There was a point in time where quality was all that mattered. Patients would forsake bedside manner. They didn't care about flashy branding. They didn't want spa water when they walked in the door. They really just wanted quality results. Often that meant overlooking things like prices, and again, like bedside manner and demeanor. They just wanted that good quality result. That was at one point in time. But then the next era of aesthetics came along, and it was the brand. The brand was the differentiator. And sadly, patients were forsaking those quality results and quality care that they wanted because they wanted to go to that insta famous injector, doctor, med spa practice. They wanted that flash. They cared about that spa water. They wanted to see that water fountain in the lobby. All of the things that came with being part of exclusivity, and part of an organization or a practice that was kind of the it factor at the moment. And oftentimes patients overlooked the things that really made a difference, like optimal outcomes and, exactly what they were getting for the money they were spending. And in this quote, he says that from his view, that in the next era, customer experience will be the differentiator. And again, that's where I really think it translates to where we are today in medical aesthetics. And quite honestly, where we've been for some time. I know that if you've ever been to a conference, you've heard everyone preaching patient experience. But what is patient experience? What is the difference between customer service and being friendly and giving good results and a true patient experience? We're going to dive into that today as we continue the conversation and really use that for the basis of how do we become exceptional, not average? How do we set ourselves apart and create that dynamic change that we want to see in our practices? I'm a very data driven person. I use data for how I help support my practices, how I put my programs together here at Aesthetic Practice Partners. And I dive into data from the patient perspective when I'm talking about how do we do things in the practice to make a difference and make that impact. And this is a startling data point that I ran into a few years ago when I was doing research that came from practice builders who polled medical aesthetics patients, and they wanted to understand what do consumers want. And this is a really, really important data point. 89% of your patients said that they would shift to practices that provided a better patient experience and engagement. That is a huge number of patients that said, we like our injectors, we like our estheticians, we like our medical providers, but if I had the opportunity to go to a practice that had a better experience overall, where I felt engaged and a part of the conversation in my medical treatments, in my aesthetic goals, I would absolutely move to that practice. And oftentimes, being willing to pay a much higher price point or cost for the services that they were receiving. So, when you really dive into this, what does this tell us? Your patients want more. They know that they can potentially get more, and they're willing to pay for it. And I think that that's a really, really important thing and brings us to you really understanding what's going on in your practice. What dynamic change do you need to make that's going to impact that patient experience, that's going to impact the top line and bottom line revenue and profits to your practice? As it says, you have to know where you are before you know where you're going. And this is the starting point for all the changes that you might potentially have to make in your practice. You have to really understand what are your practice goals and how many of you have a goal to grow revenue. How many of you have a goal to make your practice successful? But that's not enough. The goal has to be very detailed and very strategic. What is your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan? How do you dial that back to make small micro goals that are easier to accomplish and put a strategy behind? That's really important if you're going to want to make any dramatic change in your practice, knowing those goals. And the goals have to be deeper than revenue markers. Are you growing to scale your practice? Well, what does scaling look like? Does it mean growing providers? Does it mean a second location? Does it mean potentially growing to sell to private equity? We know that private equity is a very big conversation today in the aesthetic market. Why are you growing? What are you hoping to accomplish? Those are the goals, alongside, again, a lot of micro goals to get you there. You have to understand what's working and what's not working. And I like to focus on the what's working first. For me, that's important. When things are going well in a certain area of the practice, you want to make sure that any other changes that you make around those goals don't negatively or adversely affect what's really working in your practice. But you should be celebrating those as well. Those should be the pillars for the other goals and the other changes that you might potentially need to make based on what's not working. But dive a bit deeper and understand why is something not working. I oftentimes hear of practices making changes, setting goals, but not really have a true understanding, and then making other changes because that one's not working. But you really understand why it's not working really helps driving decision making, because making change just to make change is not going to positively impact the practice in the long term. You have to understand, where do you fall short? What area of the practice needs your attention to grow? Where do you need to fertilize and water and spread that sunshine, so that you can really, really make that impactful change that you're looking? But if you don't measure key performance indicators, staff performance indicators, business goals, and all the little micro metrics in between, it's not really easy to understand exactly where you fall short. You might see the big picture and then make changes based on that, but you really have to dial it in and understand the details of where you're falling short and review the data. As I said before, I'm a very data driven person. And I think that the data tells us a story that helps us create the strategy that we can then deploy to grow our businesses. Let me give you a case study. I love this. This is what I call my 5% solution. And it is very true that data should drive your strategy. As I said before, as business owners, we often make changes just to make change because we see something's not working. But what about if you use change to make positive impacts to even the things that are working based on your goals? This is a true case study from a client of mine that is a plastic surgery practice, a female plastic surgeon in Scottsdale, Arizona. This is a bit dated. It was several years ago, but I still love using this every single day. And I use it when I create strategy for my current consulting clients. But this doctor wanted to build a surgery center. So she wanted to make a positive change. And the surgery center would allow her to give a better patient experience to her surgical patients rather than doing surgeries at an outpatient surgery center or a hospital facility. But then she would also have the revenue opportunity that those facility fees would garner. So all positive things. But the thing was that she didn't want to do any flashy marketing. She didn't want to hire new employees. And she absolutely did not want to take out a loan to build this surgery center. She said, I really want to look inside my practice and find where we can come up with the financing for this surgery center. And I'm thinking, am I supposed to come in and look under cushions, start shaking things upside down and hope money's falling out? Of course not. But it was a funny thought. And she and I actually took video of us running around the office looking under cushions. And her goal was $500,000. And we did not find $500,000 underneath the cushions. But we did sit down and look at the data and look at where she is in her existing practice. And I started diving into the data and I thought, well, this is really easy. If we just do a little bit better at every touch point in the patient relationship life cycle or the journey a patient travels through our practice, and we increased our conversion rates and we increased other metrics and decreased things like our no-show rates, it will positively impact the bottom line of the practice. And this was my hypothesis as well as our actual outcome. And you can see all of her current patient data to the left of your screen in the current columns. I took that data set and I said, well, what if we just do a little bit better? What does that look like to the bottom line? So if we can increase our lead conversion rate and get more of those patients that are interested in our services and already inquiring onto the appointment schedule, we are going to see a higher number of appointments. And we all know that at times we struggle with our no shows. So, how can we do better to eliminate the no shows in our practice so that we actually get more consultations from those inquiries? Again, elevating our lead to conversion and consultations on the schedule. So, if we saw significantly more consultations, we have an opportunity to schedule more treatments, or in this case, surgeries. So, how do we increase our surgical conversion rate or your consult to treatment conversion rate? We looked at that. And then we all know that for some reason, some patients, after they've committed to treatment, do change their mind. So, how do we prevent that? If we can decrease that number to have a higher number of surgery complete, and then, of course, knowing what our average case is, we looked at all of these metrics and said, it's simple. If we just do 5% better at every single touch point, we have found nearly $500,000 that we didn't find under the couch cushions. So again, this was all hypothetical, but let's back it up a bit. How did we do this and why was this so important? If you can convert a higher number of callers, website inquiries, social DMs into appointment, clearly that conversion rate grows, positively impacting the practice. And we do that by having strategic processes in place for our lead management, very educated team members reaching out to those prospective clients and really helping impact that conversion rate. So, just for a data point for you, my lead to consult conversion rate goal for my practices in the med spa or non-surgical arena is about 80% and 60 to 70% for my surgical procedure practices. And you can see she was already doing great. She was at an 85% lead conversion rate. But to get 5% better, we needed to get her to a 90% high engagement, strategic protocols, creating follow up guidelines and strategies. If you can leverage technology to build in drip campaigns to stay engaged with those inquiries and be hyper focused on how you convert that caller at that first touch point. So, that first phone call, really accelerating the patient experience that they get. And then we focused on the no shows. So, you can see here that she had a 22% no show rate, which is actually quite high. My goal for surgical practices is 15%, and somewhere between a 15 and 20% for my non surgical practices. So, she had a bit of a higher no show rate. So, what did we do to impact that and get it down to our goal of 17%? We implemented a consultation fee, which I think is really important because I think that your time is so valuable. So, consultation fees definitely can provide a barrier for some patients that aren't sure if they're ready to book treatment yet. But I also shows you your value. Your time is important, and you want patients in your practice that respect that. So, we implemented that as well as a great confirmation system, having strategic confirmation calls, emails, texts, and continuous information being relayed back to our patients, keeping engaged with them from the time that they scheduled their appointment until the time that they actually came in for their consultation. So they were excited, they wanted to come, and their likelihood of cancellation was greater. Sorry, less. And so then we focused on, again, getting that higher number of consults on the schedule from those 931 inquiries. And then we focused on our actual consultation to procedure conversion rate. You can see that her current rate of conversion was 45%. As I said before, my surgical conversion rate goal for my practices is 65 to 70%, with most of my practices operating at a high level, somewhere between the 75 and 85%. This is a bit antiquated data. And so many years ago, the average conversion rate was 45 to 55%, and she was on the kind of bottom cusp of that. But how did we look to get her to the next level? We really, really amped up the participation of our patient care coordinator. We focused on comprehensive consultations, pre educating our clients even before they came into the consultation. Educated patients are patients that are more willing to invest in their cosmetic treatment with comprehensive consultation plans that make them feel part of the decision to help them achieve their goals. So we focused on that education and that patient experience, those high level touch points of how we stay engaged with our patients, so that we can make sure that we're converting from consultation to treatment, which also helps impact those patients that cancel after they've committed. So we've obviously increased overall revenue. But the fun part of this story is she actually increased, overpowering our expectation. And we actually hit much higher. She was closer to a 10% overall change when we just looked at the little tiny things she did at every single touch point. But we had to track every step. We had to understand the patient's decision making process, and we used data to help us understand what we were doing well, where we were falling short, and where we needed to improve the process. And she actually got about $1 million in revenue change year over year, hitting closer to that 10% mark, just simply by making small changes and thinking differently about how she does everything in the practice. And that helped us not only hypothesize, but then deep dive and then see the results in small changes, making that impactful change. And a lot of that was really focused on the patient's experience. And there is a big difference between customer service and patient experience. I'm sharing a QR code that's going to go to a small 6-minute clip that is a great representation of the difference between customer service and experience. And while it also comes from outside of the industry, the speaker is Ryan Estes, who's an amazing speaker, that he shares his own personal experience on what it's like to really elevate customer service and some of the highlights that I got from, and he hopes that you will get from his presentation, is how important it is for you to be sincere and really connect with your patients as you're helping develop this relationship that is truly meant to be a long-term patient relationship. None of us want one treatment stands. We want to engage with our patients and have long-term relationships, but you have to be sincere. People want that personalized experience. They don't want cookie cutter solutions that they can go to any med spa and get. They want your expertise to help them reach their aesthetic goals. It's so important for you to actively engage with your customers and listen. We have to listen to what their goals are. What is their motivation behind seeking treatment? Why are they wanting to make this and change? What are they wanting to enhance? What are their features that they really love about themselves when they look in the mirror that we want to make sure that we only highlight, not detract from? It's really about making meaningful connections with our patients. That's how we go to creating lifetime patients. And if you've never looked it up, help yourself understand the value of a lifetime patient in your practice could exceed upwards of 6 figures, not to mention referrals and building their network and bringing other patients into your practice. That's where that starts, is those meaningful connections. You also have to meet people where they are. That's a huge takeaway for me. In any interaction in life, it should be important for you to meet people where they are. As providers, we've been conditioned to create treatment plans that are beneficial to us. Multiple syringes, multiple units, lots of products, add this, add that. And then patients start feeling like we're overloading them with services and treatments that are beneficial to us, but it doesn't really help them meet their goals. We have to think about their goals just from an aesthetic perspective, but also timeline and budget. We have to think of ourselves and put ourselves in our patient's shoes and again, meet them where they are. And another huge aha moment for me when I watched this video is how important it is to be helpful. There's a big difference between providing a service, but truly being helpful to our clients and helping them reach their aesthetic goals, as well as how important it is for us to optimize all areas of our practice. But he's going to speak about how optimized employees are helpful. You as a business owner, leader, manager, it's really important for you to keep in mind that you have to optimize your employees and ensure that your employees have the tools, support, and resources to do their role so that they can be helpful to your customers. And how important it is for you to consistently show up and choose how you show up every single day for your patients. And I won't give away too many more details, but I really want you to scan that QR code and keep in mind all of these bullet points when we think about the difference between elevating our patient experience and really what is customer service. How do you do these things in your practice? How do you relate to your customers, your patients, and really help them meet their goals and be helpful, but really personalizing their experience? I think that when you watch this clip, you'll know exactly what I mean. It's all about, as I said before, having the right people on your team, optimizing your employees. You have to love what you do, where you do it, and who you do it with every single day. And that's going to show. I always say that passion drives performance. So take a look at your team. Who's on your team? Do they have the tools, support, and resources to do their job? Are they in the right position that they're passionate about to help them drive and propel your business forward? You also have to target your patients. Like minds seek like minds. Target who is your patient? What demographic is your niche? It's one thing to treat everyone, but to really focus on who's our tribe. Who do we want in our tribe? Who are we going to resonate to? There's a lot of providers out there, and within a stone's throw from a patient's employer or home, they're going to be able to find a treatment that helps them reach their goal. But it's who delivers that treatment? How does it work for them? But more importantly, the personal connection that they make with their provider is top of mind for patients when they're seeking a medical aesthetics provider that they want to create a long term relationship with. You also have to have highly curated treatments. Let's be honest, buying every device, having every skincare line, and every injectable portfolio, every toxin portfolio, we can't throw the kitchen sink at our patients. We have to have highly curated treatments. You have to be able to combine your treatments into comprehensive treatment plans that work well together to meet your patient's goals. Highlight what works for you, and let's be honest, if it's treatments that you love, that your staff loves, they're going to share it openly with the patients. So when you're curating your menu of services, think about your treatments, how they synergistically work together, how you have treatments that meet every need for every skin type, for every condition, for everything that you need to do. You want to have the tools in your tool belt to be able to affect change and provide the right outcome, but not duplicating procedures. When I work with practices, I always look at service menus. Where do we have gaps in service? Where do you have where do you have overlap, and how can you streamline your services, create custom packages, put signature treatments together that are truly unique to you and your practice? This is how you feed the retention of your practice, which also includes your referral programs, your membership programs, and all of these things have to work together. It is truly connected to how we really elevate that patient experience, and how we execute and have strategy is really the key to our success. All of these things are the basis. And I want you to look at all of these things within your practice and think, where do you need to optimize? Where do you need to make small changes? And how can you make sure that your team is working with your practice, that you have the right treatments focused on long term retention? These are all little things that you can make slight tweaks to when you look at every single step of the patient experience or that relationship life cycle, like I did in that previous example with the 5% solution. And they'll give you insights on where you can make small changes that create impactful, dramatic, revolutionary change in your practice. These are the things that really, as a business owner, you need to deep dive into and understand within your practice. So hopefully these tips have given you some insights on how you can create little pivots and really grow your practice. As I said before, I'm very excited to be a part of Be Her powered by MedShift. So excited that I have donated a business retreat for you and I to go to Cancun, Mexico, and spend 4 days strategizing how to make next year your best year yet. All you have to do is scan the QR code. You're probably already a member of Be Her if you're watching this webinar, and you get entered in to win an opportunity to join me in Cancun, Mexico for 4 nights We're going to do business strategy and planning, vision boarding. We're going to deep dive into your annual goals, review your 2024 business analytics, and really jump into what do you want to do to grow your business next year. We're going to assess your services and your profit margins and see where we can help boost your revenue, as well as vision board to craft the business of your dreams, alongside doing some fun leadership coaching and helping you define your leadership style, craft your leadership brand, and how do you hold yourself accountable so you can show up as the best version of yourself for your team and your patients every day. So scan the QR code, enter to win, and hopefully you'll be joining me in Cancun, Mexico next year so we can really focus on growing your business together. I love spending a little bit of time with you and sharing some pearls on how you can help your business. If you'd like to connect with me personally, here's all of my information. I would love to schedule time to learn more about you and see how we can help elevate aesthetics and your business together. Thank you so much for joining me.